Well, welcome to 2018, the year in which America decides its fate, whether the Republic will continue or whether it will devolve into a Venezuelan-style third world hell pit of isolated communities ringed by high walls and a massive sea of people lamenting their choice to move towards socialism. And it really comes down to this DACA question, right? So for those, I'm sure you're up on all of this stuff, DACA was a program that was put in, or I guess a sort of forgiveness or deferral program that was put in by Obama to allow the children of illegal immigrants to stay in America. And of course, there are about 800,000 of them, and they're portrayed as, wonderful additions to American society, valedictorians and serving in the military and fluent in English and just amazing people. And this is it's despicable as a whole that the left would use this. It's inevitable that they've lost the war of ideas since the 1960s, so they've been trying to stuff the voting ballot with immigrants instead of trying to engage in the war of ideas, because socialism has been so thoroughly discredited in both theory and practice over the last 100 years. And this 800,000, there is, of course, going to be a deal that is talked about, which is that they'll say, well, the 800,000 can stay, but there needs to be a wall and there needs to be an end to chain migration. And the moral question fundamentally is, do children get to keep the assets illegally obtained by their parents? Well, that's the fundamental. Like if your dad robs a bank and gives you $1 million, do you get to keep the $1 million when what he did was illegal? Well, of course not. Do Bernie Madoff's children get to keep the profits of his Ponzi scheme? Well, no. I mean, it all has to go back, right? So there is this general moral principle, which is the children do not get to keep assets illegally acquired by their parents, and residency in the United States, if it's illegal, then it's an asset, a value that is illegally obtained by the parents. And so offering it to the children free and clear, it's the very big question of sentimentality versus morality. The thief who cries, well, you want to let him off the hook. And there is this sentimentality that is really going to be the death of the West unless we confront it and basically find a way to eliminate it from our vocabulary. The sentimentality, like empathy and sympathy and so on, it is not a commanded moral absolute, like you just do it no matter what. It is a relationship. And this idea that it's just an outward-pushing command no matter what, that empathy and sympathy and people are upset, so we're going to appease and accommodate them despite the law, despite morality, is a fatal thing. Like if you run an online business and people send you $50 and you ship them a widget, well, if they send you the $50, you should ship them the widget, right? But you don't have this commandment that just says, I ship people widgets, whether they pay or not, whether the check goes through or not, and so on. So morality is a relationship, and abstracting morality into just some kind of universal commandment. Who do you owe moral consideration to? Well, you owe moral consideration to those who have shown moral consideration towards you. Morality is a relationship. It is not an absolute that must be enacted regardless of consequences or regardless of the behavior of other people. And so this question of these 800,000 and so on, well, of course, there's a lot of propaganda involved in it. The idea that you get a wall and an end to the chain migration, well, if the left wants the 800,000 to stay, it's because they know what happened, right? So Reagan gave amnesty to a whole bunch of people in California, and that was supposed to solve the problem of illegal immigration forever, and there was never going to be any need for any more reform or any more amnesties and so on. And of course, it didn't. What it does is it encourages, right? If you let people off the hook for their illegal actions, you encourage more illegal actions. If you let people and reward them, in a sense, for gaining and keeping a value illegally, then you simply incent more people to attempt to gain that value. And of course, California has fallen to the Democrats and will not be recovered because of demographics, because the overwhelming majority of Hispanics, of people from Mexico and so on, they vote for the left. They vote for big government because, you see, they've escaped a big government corrupt country, and they end up wanting to recreate that big government corrupt country in their new country for reasons of IQ in general that I have talked about many times before. So the basic facts is that if you allow 800,000 people to gain a path to citizenship, studies are pretty clear that everyone from Mexico who gets citizenship sponsors 6.38 more people from Mexico to come and live in America. So we're not talking about 800,000. We're talking about 5.1 million. 5.1 million people coming into America or staying in America who will overwhelmingly vote for the left, who will overwhelmingly vote for bigger government and Democrats. This is the only reason why Democrats don't care about Hispanics. They care about power, and the Hispanic vote is how they get and maintain and achieve power. And if there is a path to citizenship for the DACA recipients, you can say, oh, well, we're going to end chain migration. Oh, we're going to build a wall or whatever. It doesn't fundamentally matter because this can all be undone. And even the DACA stuff, and I've talked about this before, when it comes to family reunification, there are so many hardship clauses and so on that basically they can bring anyone in who they want. And there is a genuine and general frustration in America about, is the damn law going to be enforced, or is the law merely a political convenience for the transfer of power to more and more corrupt groups? So when it comes to the actual facts about DACA, fluency in English is pretty key to upward mobility in the United States. The Center for Immigration Studies has recently estimated that nearly a quarter of the DACA-eligible population fall into the functional illiterate category, and another 46% have only basic English ability. And so, it's better still than the Syrians who are pouring into Europe, who two-thirds of whom are illiterate even in their own language. But here we have almost three-quarters, almost 3 out of every 4 of these DACA people functionally illiterate in English. How's that going to work? What upward mobility is available? Now, you see all of this, oh, well, this DACA was a valedictorian at the high school and so on. Well, no. Despite the fact that the average age of a DACA recipient is 25, the oldest is in their late 30s, fewer than half of the DACA population has actually graduated from high school. Now, I should put the word graduated in air quotes because graduating from an American high school, particularly if you're an ethnic minority, is more a function of promote and pray rather than an actual assessment of intellectual skills. Now, you hear of all of this military service. Well, 900 DACA recipients have actually served in the U.S. military. That's 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1%. So out of 800,000, there are 900. So it just comes down to this. Do you want to have the capacity for smaller government? If you want to have the capacity for smaller government, then a path to citizenship for DACA recipients, you will never achieve it. You will never achieve it. You have, about 1 million people pouring into the United States, the majority as a result of chain migration, unvetted, unassessed, no basic reality as to their economic functionality. And what happens, of course, when massive numbers of people pour into America from third world countries, then taxes go up, services go down, and it is a population displacement because massive amounts of money are taken from the domestic population, transferred to the new population, which means the new population can afford to have more kids, and the domestic population cannot afford to have more kids or sometimes any kids. And so it is a massive demographic replacement. And if this goes forward, you need to be clear on this, because I'm going to absolutely give up on politics if the demographics prove arguments irrelevant, right? The whole point of the replacement of first world populations with third world populations is to make politics irrelevant. And you simply get ethnic in-group voting preferences, and the lower IQ groups end up voting for more and more resources from the higher IQ groups, and then you end up transitioning from Argentina to Brazil, straight on down to Mexico. And even worse down, I would argue, to Venezuela. So the only point to talk about politics is that we can actually have a debate based on ideas. If there is simply an in-group preference and a voting for the left based upon ethnicity and demography, then there is no debate that is possible. It is simply a predatory civil war fighting over ever-shrinking government resources. So I'd love to continue to talk about politics. I'd love to continue for there to be a debate. But if the demographic replacement occurs, well, the time for arguments then is past.
Are the politicians going to wake up? Americans understand what's going on, which is why every time you allow Americans to vote, every time it's on the ballot, starting with, I might add, California,
right.
With Proposition 187 back in the 90s. Every time Americans are allowed to vote, they vote for less immigration, fewer benefits for immigrants, an obscure economics professor, Dave Bratt, over a member of the leadership, Eric Andrew. We have put Donald Trump in the White House. I'm a little annoyed that Trump isn't doing this on his own, but what is with the rest of the Republican Party? What will wake them up?
Yeah, and it's such a wonderfully important point that you're making. And this is one of the subjects of a recent column of yours where you actually implore the Republicans to do something popular. If you look at I was delighting this week at the almost slapstick, farcical praise puff pieces about Ivanka Trump's role in passing the tax cuts, which I just find them so delightful because they're so absurd. This is a liberal Democrat. At last I checked, Ann. The bill was voted for across party lines, aside from 12 or so Republicans that voted against it. There were 0 Democrats that came across the aisle. The bill has something like 26% approval rating, maybe lower, and we're writing what a great achievement this was for Ivanka, who got, I guess, the child tax credit up a little bit, which is fine, but it's I don't want to dismiss that.
I hate the child tax credit.
Yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic here because I don't want to. I know our reputation as Breitbart is we're Ivanka haters, and rightfully so. But but just reading what a huge achievement this is for a bill that is entirely unpopular. And in the meantime, you point out in your column just how popular conservative style and Coulter style immigration reform would be. Yet, if you recall, and I know you wrote the book on it quite literally, Donald Trump was the only candidate out of 17 who ran for the Republican primary nomination who actually campaigned on less immigration. Even Ted Cruz wanted increased legal immigration.
Yep.
And the vast majority, not the majority, the vast majority of the country wants the same or fewer immigrants coming in. And yet the memo, we got 20 million readers a month at Breitbart, 25 million, hundreds of millions of page views. People read your column, and why don't people get it? I don't understand. The information is out there. People don't like this widespread, unchecked, unfettered immigration.
Yes, and if nothing else, I mean, apart from the fact that Republicans, as Donald Trump tweeted back in, I think it was 2013, when Rubio was pushing his first, Kill America amnesty bill, and about the third or fourth that the American people had shut down, Donald Trump tweeted, Republicans, this is a suicide mission. All of these amnestied illegals are going to be voting for the Democrats. It is, besides the fact that Republicans, as Trump knew back before he was president, apparently, not only is this suicide for the Republican Party, and I don't know, I don't think I'd cheer if I were a Democrat. It's not exactly preserving the Democratic Party in its current form either. It's about to become all identity politics. I think there's a reason that the Democratic leadership is all white and over 80 years old. That's the end of any white leaders in the Democratic Party. So Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them planning on running for president. But apart from being a suicide mission, if you're just a purely cynical politician and all you want is short-term popularity, I got it for you. I have it right here. You'll be amazed at how popular you'll become if you start pushing the issues that Donald Trump pushed, that Dave Bratt pushed, that the American people continuously keep voting for every time they get a chance. I don't know if it's cowardice or corruption, but we can't get these Republicans to notice that.
Yeah, and let's not forget that. And the thing that you make so hilariously clear in your column, which is one of the things you do quite well is you make points that are hotly debated seem incredibly obvious, which is, I think, a pretty high compliment for a columnist. But if you think about how we can't agree as a society on whether or not we want to keep more of our own money, like that's an even split. In fact, a lot of us don't want to keep more of our own money. But we have an overwhelming agreement that the immigration system is totally screwed up, and it's screwed up in the direction of too many people are coming in unchecked, whether it be the wall or chain migration or legal immigration or all the above. Whatever your issue is, we all agree we need to start slowing it down. Or we don't all agree, but over 2/3 of the country agrees. And yet the Republicans, who last I checked had both houses of Congress and the presidency, and the president ran on these exact issues, zero movement on that in the first year.
Oh, absolutely zero movement. In fact, movement in the opposite direction. It's the damnedest thing. We elect Donald Trump, and all they're talking about is amnesty for Dreamers, which I think it's worth pointing out. Well, two things on the Dreamers. I was just biking my annual Christmas bike ride, and I noticed lots and lots of Hispanic workers on my pleasant little bike ride. And I mean, it has to be said that many of the legal and illegal low wage workers, they're incredibly hard workers. They're really nice people, and it occurred to me on my bike ride that I actually like all of the illegal immigrants except the Dreamers. They're the ones I want deported first because they're the activists. They're the obnoxious ones. They're the ones who go to congressional offices and stamp their feet and say, "How dare you not rush to grant us amnesty?" Whereas the actual illegals don't have time to be protesting. They're busy working, being polite, being so friendly and nice, and saying Merry Christmas. Let's start by deporting the Dreamers. That's point one. My point two is, don't be fooled into thinking that it is only, these warm puppy illegal aliens. And by the way, I don't like any of the ones they're putting forward. I notice we don't see a lot of them on TV because, again, the Dreamers themselves are heinous, and anyone would want to deport them. But don't be fooled by all of the nonsense about, it's just this limited group of people. And I mean, even Breitbart writers say it could, and CIS and the Immigration Restrictions Group, they keep saying this could amnesty up to, X number of Dreamers. No. It amnesties everyone. I promise you, people who have never set foot in America will be coming here claiming, because I promise you, proof will not be required. This will go before our courts, the same courts that are refusing to let Donald Trump exercise his full constitutional and statutory authority. They will come and say, "Oh yeah, I was brought here as a child. I'm 45 right now, and I have no job skills, and I plan to instantly get lots of expensive medical treatment on you. Thank you, American taxpayer. But I have no proof. Oh, you can't ask me for proof." And the judge will say, "Oh, you're right. That's unfair. We can't ask for proof. Amnestied. You count as a Dreamer." We've been through this before. We have done this before. The judiciary is worse now than it was back when they were expanding the agricultural amnesty, something I write about in Adios America. It was supposed to be this tiny, the agricultural amnesty was part of Ronald Reagan's amnesty bill. It was supposed to be a tiny little amnesty just if you had, these hardworking, actually the ones I was just describing, the hardworking guest workers, some illegals working on farms. If you could prove you'd worked on an American farm sometime in the last, I forget what it was, the last actual year, you could get in on the agricultural amnesty. Oh, you're a hardworking agricultural worker. At one point, they had close to it. There was supposed to be a few 100,000. They had more than 800,000 applications, of which I think it was 867,000 applications, of which they had determined more than 800,000 were fraudulent, and they were all amnestied.
Wow.
They all just get amnesty. Why? Because courts say, and by the way, they were still being amnestied from the 1986 amnesty bill a few years ago. They're still coming forward. They're just moving to America and saying, "Hey, I want to get in on this too." And it's so unfair because I was working off the books. How can I produce records? Well, how much harder is it to prove the date on which you entered our country illegally? No, any amnesty, because of our courts, no matter how limited it is, they could limit it to rocket scientists with a PhD. It will go before our courts, and everybody gets in. It's lights out for America right away.
Yeah, that's right, and you get to say it directly. And sometimes in our reporting, we have to keep it a little more vanilla than that. But our own John Binder, who's our top reporter on the issue, along with
he's
Monroe,
so great.
Yeah, he's spectacular. He's been our rising star of the year at Breitbart News. I think goes without saying. But he says exactly what you say, which is that it's not being cynical. It's just reality that this is the minimum numbers we're talking about. It always ends up being more. And the fact of the matter is, why are we even having this discussion without our wall that we were promised? And is the key to whether or not this presidency is going to be successful, without a doubt. So we had to take a break. And when we come back from paying bills, I want to expand on what I sort of introduced at the top of this segment, which is that why, if the wall does not get built, nothing else matters. And I want to, Ian is going to explain what I meant.
Here to set me straight about this is Donald Trump. Oh, I'm sorry. I confuse you with him because you're both tall and blonde and obnoxious sometimes and say rude things.
First in the hearts of the people.
How does the left lie about immigration?
Well, the original lie was the 1965 Immigration Act, pushed by Teddy Kennedy, supported by Bobby Kennedy and Dean Rusk and the Washington Post, and all of them swore up and down this immigration law will not change the basic demographics of America. The same countries that have traditionally populated America will continue to populate it. The demographics will not change. That turned out to be a massive, enormous lie, but now if anyone calls them on it, it's racist.
Clearly the demographics changed, but not that much.
Oh, yes, that much. From the beginning of America until 1970, the country was always about 80 to 90% white, 10 to 20% black. That's what America was.
And you want to keep it that way?
I
That
think
sounds
the American
racist.
people should have been, that's what they say now. I think the American people should have been asked about it. But no, they were lied to, and now if you say, hey, you guys lied to us, the answer is you're racist. Really what is happening is America is being transformed into Latin America, particularly Mexico. More than a third of all legal immigrants are from Mexico. At least 60, 70% of illegal immigrants are from Mexico. Can you ask the American people, hey, would you guys prefer to be living in Mexico? Let's change our country. No country in world history has transformed itself into another country like this, and it was done without checking with the American people, and in fact, directly, specifically, knowingly lying to the American people.
How many of you agree with her on this? A few. Okay.
They're embarrassed. They don't want to be called racists. That's the trick. Let's just change the population and then accuse anyone who disagrees with what we've done to the country, call them racist. But I noticed none of you immigrated to Mexico. So I'm thinking that a lot more of you agree with me than are claiming to right now for fear of being called racist. In fact, Mexican immigrants didn't stay there. They didn't immigrate to Honduras.
No, because
China didn't immigrate to
country.
Pakistan.
They
wanted to come to the country that is or was America. If this continues, it is not going to be America.
Why isn't it America if there are more people from Latin America and from Asia?
Because these are very, very different cultures. Very different cultures. What determines the least corrupt countries is number of years of British rule and Protestantism. If you were to ask Anne, I'd say you want a country run by either WASPs or Ashkenazi Jews, but I haven't done the studies the Harvard guys have done. Americans overwhelmingly say they want less immigration, not more.
And what's the problem? Switzerland, Australia, they have twice as many immigrants per capita as we have.
Switzerland, you have to be there 3 generations before you can become a citizen. I think that's a fine idea.
27% of the country is made up of immigrants. It's 13% in the United States.
I'm confident they are not taking more immigrants from Nigeria than England as America is.
Since you bring up Nigeria,
I don't believe the stat you're about to give.
That Nigerians are more likely to work than native-born Americans? Nigerians who come here?
Yeah, no,
higher
and
percentage?
allegedly
Also from
higher
Ghana?
educated.
Twice.
No, I've gotten too many requests to contribute to the Nigerian prince or fill out a credit card to believe any
That's
of
a
their
scam.
statistics.
That's different from actual
Where do you
Nigerians
think
coming
this comes
here.
from? Where do you think this comes from? It's self-reports.
They are not twice as likely to get a college degree as
I don't
Americans.
believe it. I do not believe it.
I think she's a lot smarter than presidential candidate Lindsey Graham. But when it comes to immigration, I think she's wrong and Graham is right.
I think most are hardworking people that come from poor and corrupt countries to make a better life.
They are, and that's a good thing.
So what? Good for them. Very admirable. Is it good for America?
On balance, I would say yes.
Well, that's the question that should be asked, not that they're hardworking or admirable people.
Not that you have all the answers, but what do you think? Are they on balance good for America?
This is so not a question to be polling people on.
Hands up? Yes? No?
Okay, now you're annoying me even more than the polls do. All we ever hear is diversity is a strength, diversity is strength. We're a nation of immigrants. These are lies. You never get to hear the other side. Look, 70%, more than 70% of illegal immigrants are accepting government assistance.
That's not true.
It's absolutely true. So maybe before
polling
people, you should have the facts.
If they're not eligible for food
Yes,
stamps.
they are. They're eligible for all kinds of government assance. You're completely wrong.
For some, their children get educated. They get hospital emergency
And
room
I think
treatment.
you're wrong about food stamps, and they get health care. They often get housing
They don't get
assistance.
welfare. They don't get Section 8
housing. No, they don't
housing.
get one form of welfare. People who are poor and coming from dysfunctional cultures, from corrupt cultures, who are used to being bossed around, are not going to be, working harder than Americans and less likely to accept government assistance. And they are driving down low-wage workers. Income inequality is through the roof. They aren't taking your job. They're probably not taking any of your jobs, but they are taking jobs of people at the bottom of the income ladder, and they're our fellow Americans.
Doing jobs Americans often don't want to do.
They don't want to do them free. They don't want to do them for $3 an hour.
Or it's illegal to do it for $3.
No, I want to
these
bring in
days.
more people to compete with you for your job. No, but that's
Bring 'em
not
in.
what. Oh, no. That's not what happens. That's not our immigration policy. So you can be macho and say that, but that's not what's happening.
Fair criticism, but when you
Thank
talk
you.
about the contribution, this is from the CBO. More immigrants would lower the deficit. And
That's nonsense.
I mean, they pay into the Social Security
they
system,
don't.
but they often don't take it out, especially if they're illegal.
Yes.
The National Research Council, the typical immigrant imposes a net fiscal cost of $3,000. That's what you're talking about. But the descendants of the immigrant have a positive contribution of $83,000.
No. This is absolutely ludicrous.
The National
They can
Research
state
Council,
that-
they're smarter than you.
No, they aren't. They're liars. They're bigger liars.
But what about all the stuff we gain? I mean, Google, IKEA, YouTube, bicycles, blow dryers, basketball, football, shopping malls.
We used to get the creme de la creme. That isn't our immigration policy anymore. Now it's bring in cheap labor to drive down the poorest Americans' wages and block vote for the Democrats, which is working like a charm for both those groups. And the other ones you mentioned, these are the same groups that are mentioned over and over again. Okay, we got one from Russia, a few from Germany, and a few from Britain. If that's what we want, then let's get that. Let's not be bringing in 1 million immigrants from Mexico every year. Where
about
is the
from India?
Mexican Google?
How
Yeah,
about the
what's their-
computer programmer from India?
Yeah, that turns out to be another scam, this H-1B visa. They aren't inventing some great companies. They aren't starting Netscape. What they're doing is standard computer programming work. The reason they are
That's
desirable...
useful. That's great.
No, what is useful is to the employer, they can't switch jobs. They are indentured servants, something this country got rid of 100 years ago.
I think we should let more people in legally and there'd be less sneaking in.
Well, but it depends
Work
who you're
permits.
letting in.
People
I
who
want
want to
in...
work.
No. You can't play both
But
ways
already
here.
the rules
no.
are
When we're
stacked.
talking about how fabulous the immigrants are, suddenly I hear about Google and PayPal. But now when we're talking about admitting them, you want the guy to do your landscaping. Fine, admit the ones who are
both
going
to come in. You're saying things that Americans just don't say in polite company.
Well, yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Because the reason Americans are sensitive and your audience are such scaredy cats of being called racist, sorry, but you are you? Is the reason we are sensitive to the race issue is because of how black Americans were treated. It's because of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, both by Democrats, I might add. Someone who's never set foot in this country, we don't owe anything to. Black Americans have a very specific history and rights and privileges in this country because of what they have been through. They can complain about racism. If you're not an American black, then just shut up.
I say we have a good life here, and we can bring more people in from everywhere.
As they compete with you. But they're not.
Right, let's go back to U.S. politics with a guest who has gained considerable notoriety and over 1.3 million Twitter followers by speaking her mind without borders, except maybe on matters of walls and immigrations. Conservative commentator Ann Coulter joins us from New York City. And we're such a contrast up here. We're opening our doors to Syrian refugees and other Middle East refugees. The president you support is banning or pausing immigration and refugee arrivals. What do you see as the effect of these sort of twin solitudes on the relations between Trump and Trudeau in the longer term? Is there going to be a border price to be paid?
Well, you got a lot of catching up to do in Canada. I mean, Canadian immigration policy for decades has been more like what Trump is suggesting, and that is looking at immigration as any other government policy. What's good for the people who already live there. For 50 years, America has been taking the poorest of the poor, the most backward, dysfunctional cultures, and a lot of what got Trump elected was people saying, okay, that's enough. America needs a little me time now. We have our own veterans, our own elderly, our own poor people. In fact, our own immigrants who came in the last decade and the decade before that and the decade before that, which is why the Trump administration and everyone else keeps referring to it as a pause. This isn't hatred for the rest of the world. It's having a pause to take care of the people who are already here.
Okay, but what's the conservative view down there of Canada? We have, our prime minister's tweeted about us being open arms to refugees after the president's pause in immigration. Is that going to cause us trouble, do you think?
Well, looking at what happened to America for the last 50 years and what's happening in Western Europe right now, I might say it would cause some trouble. But you got about 5 decades of total open borders to very different cultures from your own before you're going to be any place where America is, because that's what we've been doing for 50 years now.
I would beg, we have had an awful lot of immigration over many decades here, Ann, but let's talk a little bit about...
Nothing like ours.
Well, we brought more Syrian refugees in last year than the United States did, so we're pretty immigration open and certainly...
And for 50 years... Yeah, no, you took about 200 Hmong, we took millions. For 50 years, we've been taking more than 1 million immigrants a year, 90% from the third world. You guys got a lot of catching up to do. If I were a Canadian, I wouldn't say that was one of America's best policies. I'm not recommending you emulate it, but I'm just saying, this sudden rush under Trudeau, you're still way behind us.
I'm curious what you thought about Donald Trump today, his call to the Australia Prime Minister. There's talk about this refugee transfer agreement continuing. Republican John McCain rode to the rescue to try and calm it down after this phone hang-up. Does your president in some ways need a lesson in diplomacy when a Five Eyes ally is on the line?
Well, I'm waiting to see what the real story is on that. I keep getting one version from the media and then 12 hours later, oh, that didn't happen at all. I mean, we just got it with the Russian sanctions. So I haven't seen confirmation. Maybe it's coming across the transom now from either the Australian Prime Minister or Trump that there was any hanging up. But as for the policy being discussed, again, Australia takes these quote, refugees, i.e. people who want to come to a first world country and live off its taxpayers. Americans, a big part of the election was saying, no, we want to take care of our own. And we're not talking about people. I mean, as I wrote in my column this week, there are a lot of misnomers in this refugee business. Among them, the idea that we're taking in people who are fleeing the modern equivalent of the Holocaust. No, I mean, even in the New York Times examples of their most sympathetic cases, we had one an Iraqi with respiratory problems and diabetes who was returning from Iraq after fulfilling his duties as a provincial leader over there. They're not fleeing something. They're coming here because they get free health care, free food, free housing, which is fine. We're a generous nation. We've been more than generous, but we're about at the point of saying we gave at the office.
Okay, but you're talking to Australia, a very strong ally of the United States, a member of the Five Eyes security umbrella, and yet your president hangs up on the guy because he wants to keep an agreement going. Isn't that diplomatically toxic?
Well, for one thing, I'm not believing that he hung up yet. As I say, I suspect that is fake news. I love Australia. I love Canada. I love Britain. I still don't want to be taking more than 1,000 poor people whom we have no responsibility to. I mean, what this immigration scam always runs on is, well, for one thing, American and Canadians, big-heartedness, but particularly in America, we're supposed to treat foreigners as if they're American blacks. Well, no, we have a special relationship with African Americans in this country because of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. What did we do to the rest of the world? We don't owe them. And yet they show up with a lot of needs and a lot of grievances, and this has been going on a very long time. We just need a little break for a while. Otherwise, there's going to be no lifeboat to put people on.
Do you think this is temporary, or do you think this could be permanent in some cases?
No, I think it's temporary, though my idea of temporary, what I would like it to be, maybe a little longer than yours. But we need to assimilate the ones already here. We need to dust off the books. We need to figure out serious vetting procedures. And also, not only vetting for, is this person likely to shoot up the San Bernardino Community Center, but vetting in terms of, should we really be moving these people out of their country? I mean, you can also hurt other countries around the world by taking, the people that they need to build the country back up again. We want genuine refugees. We want to make sure it wouldn't be better to help them where they are, which we do a lot and we can keep doing. But when they insist on coming here and signing up for Social Security, when half of my party is out there saying we have to reform entitlements, i.e. raise the retirement age, cut benefits. No, how about raise American benefits and let us retire earlier and stop taking in the poor of the world?
You write in various news media. You have a column. Our prime minister just the other day publicly demanded Fox News issue a correction after it tweeted that a shooter in a Quebec City mosque was of Moroccan origin when he was a white university student. They tried twice to get this corrected. What's your reaction to what was done? Should Fox not have been a lot quicker in pulling that erroneous tweet down?
Well, I have absolutely nothing to do with Fox. I don't even follow them on Twitter, so I was unaware of that tweet. But, of course, incorrect tweets should be corrected.
Okay. Last question. The Donald Trump we've seen in the first 2 weeks, is this the Donald Trump we're going to see for the next 4 years?
Oh, I hope so. It's like Christmas every day. The only problem is, and he warned us about this, is it's getting exhausting winning so much. Just winning, winning, winning.
I love Geraldo. He's misunderstanding. The 36,000 people that we're referring to were criminals released that were not sent back to their countries that committed these crimes as soon as they were released. 193 murders, 426 sexual assaults, 303 kidnappings. Your reaction, Ann?
Right. Well, first of all, I want it on the record, Geraldo and everyone else is now admitting there are a minimum of 30 million illegals in the country. And moving on from there, what I have found, now having written a book about it, and it is particularly about immigrant crime, not just illegal immigrant crime, is it is like the beginning of Anna Karenina, the truth about about immigration is always the same. The lies are always different. You have to look at what, the different ways these lying statistics are made. But I think the overall point is none of these people have a right to be here. Geraldo says you're defaming a group of people. Look, by definition, we are talking about people who have no right to be living in America, whether they are legal or illegal immigrants. This is a government policy. We don't want their crime rate to be the same as Americans. We don't want it to be a little bit less. We want zero criminals being brought in by our government and preying on Americans. I think the true evidence is overwhelming that it is far more than Native Americans. I mean, we know that immigrants, and not just illegal immigrants, are far more likely to be on government assistance than the native-born. That's crazy. Why are we bringing in people whom we have to help? That is meant for our poor people, and that includes Hispanic poor people, and it includes black poor people. We have to care about our own. But secondly, as I've said before, only 25% of the entire California prison population is white. Well, California is only about 6% black. So what are liberals saying? That 75% of the inmates of California prisons, which has been accepting inmates from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, back when California was far majority white and black, they're still in prison. That whole Manson family, 75% of those, are you saying, are black? No, of course they're
Let me
Hispanics.
get a response.
Yeah, some are anchor babies.